Good morning. Today, we get a chance to be out in Los Angeles, and the nice thing about Los Angeles is that it's the entertainment capital of the world, but it also happens to be the center of, at least in the US, the gaming industry. And few people know that the gaming industry has dwarfed the movie and television industry as far as sales and use. Part of this is generational, whether you're a couple years older than me and played pinball, or like me, played Space Invaders or whatever, the use of games has become more and more something that people use, not only for entertainment, but as their way to tell stories. But the money kind of plays this out. So if you look, for example, at Candy Crush, which is a game that pretty much every teenage girl and many of us in this room have on their cell phones. And the reason I know this, by the way, is there's been 2.7 billion downloads of this game, is that this game has generated somewhere in the range of about $5 to $6 billion for its creators. Now, to contrast that, the biggest movie of last year, and probably ultimately of all time, is the most recent Star Wars movie. And in The Last Jedi, it's about 1.3 billion. So if you just take this simple mobile game, you're looking at about 4 times the amount of revenue that's been generated by it. Of course, this filters through beyond just mobile games, beyond Candy Crush, and it really speaks to maybe generations. An example of that is The Legend of Zelda. In 1986, Nintendo came out with this fantasy game where you basically became this character, Link. And Link would go, in order to save Princess Zelda, the leader of his community of Hyrule. Well, subsequently later, Link has grown up, and as various versions of the game have come forward, everybody has learned more and more about Zelda. And the reason I tell that is because, obviously, it's more than just simple gameplay. It's about relationships with characters and about whether it be storytelling or engagement. That's what's happening. And so you see this kind of gamification of storytelling, and you also see it in things like education, where all of a sudden people aren't merely getting grades, they're getting experience points and getting awards, because this is the way in which people learn. What does this have to do with anything? So, in December, we saw on the Ethereum blockchain basically a complete freezing up with increasingly high transaction rates, which we call gas on the Ethereum network, of Ether, and slower transactions because of the invention of the first widely adopted game on the blockchain called CryptoKitties. Has anybody here played CryptoKitties? Well, I'll explain to the 98% of people in this room and probably 99.8% of people online. CryptoKitties is basically a game in which you purchase a kitty, and by purchasing a second gender-fluid kitty, you can breed them and then sell them. They have 256 different combinations for each kitten, and by combining those two, there's 4 billion different types of kitties that can be bred. Now, why is it that in the first week that 5 million CryptoKitties were sold? $5 million worth of CryptoKitties were sold. And by the way, the most expensive one for $114,000 for one fake kitten. Well, obviously, part of this is kind of the human's need to gamble online, right? We've seen that not just from online casinos and other things, but the crypto market itself. But to me, that part's not very interesting at all. In fact, if you think about it, the crypto market, much like the initial internet financial markets, probably isn't that relevant. Yeah, we're going to have our winners, and we don't know who they are yet, but you'll have your Amazons and you'll have your eBays, and obviously we're going to have our scores of Netscapes and our Pets.com, and all these things will shake out of it. So that part's not very interesting, but what is compelling is the fact that it is a clear demonstration not only of and women's interest in gambling online, but more importantly about the fact that now applications are being widely deployed on the blockchain. And that's really the story, right? So instead of just thinking about it as a way in which we're transacting financial transactions, as we talk about here in FinTech 2020, not just about the way the stock market works or the laws, but the fact is that applications are now moving onto the blockchain, and that is exciting. If you think about the world in which that beyond games will affect, that part is the important lesson of CryptoKitties. Now, of course, much like the Pokemon Go game that was wildly popular for 3 weeks in the summer of 2016, I suspect that we probably won't be discussing CryptoKitties a year from now. But it is an important marker because as we sit here in the world of entertainment and the US Capitol for gaming, we have to remember that the blockchain really is more than just money. It's also about doing things, it's about sharing experiences, it's about telling stories. And most importantly, it's about expanding the community. With all that being said, I've been publishing a series of articles, including one today on this topic. You could see it on my LinkedIn, so I'm happy to kind of connect with you there. And I'd also, I think, enjoy, as we're talking about things, look, I'm a lawyer, and I could nerd it up with the best of you with nerdy lawyer talk. But to think a little bit more expansively about what the presenters are talking about today, about the different methods in which the blockchain is being used in order to actually transform the world. Now, behind that, the lawyers and the regulators and everybody else is going to play this game of catch-up, right? Of kind of understanding how this fits into our broader world. But as these different groups today are presenting their views, we have to keep in mind that the transformation that really began back in the 90s, when gaming became something that was no longer done in arcades and on boards, but done online with other people, that building of community and businesses is now being transformed onto the blockchain. So with that being said, I'm going to turn this over to our next speaker. I don't, of course, have the agenda in front of me. Sure. Yeah, if anybody has a question or comment on, thanks, on gamification of the blockchain, we can do that now. Yeah.
On that kitty thing, I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Was it a security? And why did because if people are investing with the hope of making money, I guess it would be security, right?
So the question is CryptoKitties a security? So here's my developing view on this, and obviously we are going to have the best and brightest lawyers tell me how wrong I am today. You know, on one hand, on one extreme, you have a security that is an ownership in a company with the hope that you're going to make money based on the fact the company makes money. On the other extreme, you have what we will just broadly call beanie babies. And I'll describe it that way because the makers of CryptoKitties describe these as virtual beanie babies, but also because we all are familiar with the fact that people would literally go into the toy store, they would grab up these beanie babies at extraordinarily high prices to just then resell them. This is before Craigslist and stuff, so it was a lot more monotonous. But the point is that there has always been kind of this legality of buying and selling stuff, right? And so the question, you know, the legal question is this more like owning a share of a company or more like owning a beanie baby? And my view with respect to CryptoKitties specifically is that it's a little bit more like owning a beanie baby. Now, that being said, whether or not this gamification is actually illegal gambling, right? Because you are basically buying for a chance to create something more valuable, a lot like playing a slot machine, is a whole different question. But with respect to whether or not every transaction on the blockchain is a security or not, I would say this would go in the department of not a security. So that answer.
So let's say the end result was not a security, but when they were trying to raise money to develop this whole thing over here, wasn't that, would you consider that partly a security?
So then the question is, so as they raise money in order to build this business to sell CryptoKitties, is that in fact a security? So here is what they decided to do. They decided that instead of raising money, they would merely go ahead and sell a CryptoKitty every 15 minutes. Now it's built into the smart contract. So for a 1-year period, every 15 minutes you can buy a CryptoKitty. And that price is set by the sales price of the last 5 CryptoKitties plus 50%. Using this method, they're going to raise hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And so the question is that a security or not? So during our kind of run up to this point in time, we had our several-year love affair with rewards-based crowdfunding. And rewards-based crowdfunding was basically, hey, you pay for something and we'll deliver it to you in the future. We became comfortable with the idea that that wasn't a security because you weren't expecting a return of anything. And here, the approach of the developers was, hey, what we're going to do is we're basically going to have a game that will generate us income over the next year. You know, we'll program it, and then every 15 minutes we'll let a kitty roll off the conveyor belt, and we'll sell them. And so in this particular case, the developers were mindful of the fact that there is a way to raise money that wasn't a security, and they did it. But, of course, all this begs a bigger question, which is, why is it that we make securities so hard to sell so as to incentivize people to make up kittens to sell every 15 minutes? So with that being said, I think that this is actually a really good illustration, not just because of the popularity or the quick popularity of it and the gamification, because it does illustrate those couple points about securities and whether or not everything on the blockchain is one. Any other comments? So yeah.
Token is security or is commodity or is worthless?
So at the expense of having David Silver, the attorney, later tell us that basically everything's a security, there is kind of this sliding scale, in my view, of what is and what isn't. For example, you know, Bitcoin is not a security, right? On the other hand, there are people who are out there selling tokens in order to raise money to build a company. That is a security, right? Almost always. In this particular case, people are using Ether on the Ethereum blockchain to transact in buying and selling these fake kittens. And so my view is that that's not a security, it's not a securities violation, and I guess more importantly and more interestingly, opens up yet another route of regulation, which is gambling, right, which is gaming. So now not only do you have kind of CFTC and SEC oversight, but this falls into the same world where people were playing poker online or whatever we were doing 10 years ago pretty freely. And that opens up a whole series of other agencies that might be interested. So,
He wrote the first book of equity crowdfunding, this Amazon paperback.
yeah, it gets better. It's on audiobook too. It's a,
He wrote the first book maybe 5 years ago, really involved with the Jobs Act, and you have a law firm in Phoenix, and you
do.
Mostly security.
Yep.
Could you tell us?
Yep, so I'm with Radix Law. We're a boutique 12-person firm based in Scottsdale, Arizona. And we work with companies not only in the United States but around the world on various projects. Our kind of main core is on securities and transactional work, but we also do cross-border disputes and other things. Obviously, the great part about Phoenix is its proximity toward getting to LA. So I finally get to get out there, but our second best thing is that it's March and spring training baseball. So not only do I have a law firm there, but I also function as part of the Visitor Bureau.